Test, test. Test, test. Test, test. Hello, hello. Hello. Hello, hello. Test, test, test. The stream will be starting soon.
two.
Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light, and this is my podcast. Welcome, guys. Thank you if you have taken time out of your Friday to join us. I appreciate it. This is the very beginning of our 5-week podcast on 9/11 conspiracy theories. The way that we have done this is to break it up into timelines. We're going to do a podcast today with Jeremy, and it's going to be what led up to 9/11, the events precluding it. And then I'm going to do a podcast on the towers, the Twin Towers. And then Rob is going to do a podcast on the Pentagon. Jory is going to do a podcast on the airplane in Pennsylvania. And then our 5th podcast will be a roundtable where we all sit around, discuss the information, the facts, and the opinions, and give our opinions or, what we think of the facts. And then you can also take part in that conversation by leaving your comments and telling us what you think. We're going to try and present this in a fact-based way so that when I talk about opinions, I'm going to be talking about, when we're doing our research, other people's opinions of what happened. We're going to try and do it in a fact-based way. Of course, we're human and we will have opinions. But we really want you to decide what you think of the evidence and the facts that we present you. So this is as much your podcast as it is ours, and I hope that you'll take part and have a conversation with us. I'm not in any way saying that this is how we feel or this is what we think. We want to just take it all together and look at it in a big picture, but slowly, so it's all the information can be gone through. So we will be having today, and hopefully for each podcast, we have myself, obviously. We have Jeremy, who's
Hi.
going to be our first podcast. Yeah, sorry, Jeremy, I stepped on your high. We're going to have Jory.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Rob.
Hello, everybody.
And I am very excited about this. There's going to be a lot of hard work going into these podcasts, and I really hope that you enjoy it. So, I want to say this. If you do have comments during this podcast, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If there's something that needs to be addressed immediately, moderator Maya will let us know so we can stop and address it if possible, or acknowledge it. So at the end of the podcast, we will also be taking your questions. So there'll be plenty of time for everyone to get in their questions and ask us, what we think of the information presented today. Is everybody ready?
Yep.
All right, then let me hand this off to Jeremy, who's going to start this 5-week podcast.
Alrighty. Okay, so we all kind of know that the events of 9/11 are kind of labeled as a false flag. And I think, especially recently, the term has been kind of muddied a little bit. So I want to start off with a direct quote for the original term that defines false flag. So the false flag originally referred to pirate ships that flew flags of countries as a disguise to prevent their victims from fleeing or preparing for battle. Sometimes the flag would remain, and the blame for the attack would be laid incorrectly on another country. Their term today extends beyond naval encounters to include countries that organize attacks on themselves and make the attacks appear to be by the enemy nations or by terrorists, thus giving the nation that was supposedly attacked a pretext for domestic repression or a foreign military aggression. So the term doesn't necessarily mean the event didn't take place. So, people like Alex Jones will, say otherwise. They'll use the term as if a way to say that everything was faked. But I want to clarify that when I use the term false flag, I mean it in that sense where the event, I'm not disputing the event taking place. I'm disputing more along the lines of the correlation between the perpetrators and, the country that was harmed by the event, and seeing what actually, putting in question, I guess, the motives and what actually happened, but not completely saying that 9/11 didn't happen, which there are people out there who say that.
Right.
Yeah. So
it didn't happen?
Yeah, apparently it didn't happen.
Well, in the UK, they knew about it before we did, so...
Yeah.
Australia also isn't real. Australia, never a thing.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I never knew that about false flag. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah,
problem,
that was a really good start. I'm glad, because we do hear we do hear like Alex Jones throw around the term false flag.
Yeah.
So
and he very much
that's
implies that the things didn't happen at all.
right.
Yeah, and that's problematic.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's good to understand that, and that totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
by the way, pirates, that was a good idea. Just
Yeah,
saying.
right. Those are clever. They don't get the reputation of being clever guys, but
Right.
so I want to start off with this isn't a confirmed false flag at all, but it's one that is a very substantial mark in history, and it's kind of split down the middle, honestly, which when I was researching it kind of surprised me. With historians and stuff, they kind of swing either way on this, but the burning of the Reichstag building in Germany, that is probably one of the biggest and oldest relatively modern false flags, or theorized false flags. So in 1933, just 1 month after Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, the Reichstag building, which was the home of the German parliament, was burnt down, completely destroyed. Now, tensions were already a brew between the Nazi Party and the Communists of Germany. Hitler and the Nazi Party, of course, blamed the fire on a communist. He was a Dutch communist by the name of Van der Lubbe. And he was apparently a known pyromaniac, so he wasn't exactly like an innocent guy. He was apparently, I guess back in the day, if you were a politician and you didn't agree with somebody, it wasn't odd for you to just burn down the courtroom or something. So apparently he was that kind of guy. So he's an obvious choice to be a patsy if he did do it or if he didn't do it. You'd be like, oh, the guy who burned stuff down? Yeah, probably him. So he is a communist. So he was later executed for his crimes. And at the time, many believed that it was the Communist Party and him who did it. He said he acted alone in the trials, but historians, like I said, they kind of go either way on this. So this is a good example of a politically motivated false flag, if it is a false flag, or just an event that was used very purposely for a political agenda. So you might be asking yourself, if the communists didn't do it, then who did it? Well, some people theorize that Hitler and the Nazi Party themselves did it. You also ask yourself after that, well, why would Hitler, the Chancellor of Germany, burn down his own German parliament? Doesn't really seem like it's helping anything. Well, I think as important as the events themselves are, I think the events that follow are just as important, if not more. So just a day after the fire, Hitler, with the help of President Hindenburg, established the Reichstag Fire Decree. Now, the Reichstag Fire Decree is a set of restrictions on civil liberties such as habeas corpus, freedom of press, freedom of expression, free association, freedom of assembly, and even restrictions on the post and telephone. So after that fire, which impacted the German parliament themselves, the German people had severe restrictions on their civil liberties. So that's important to take into account, not just the fact that the fire happened. You know, what happens after is very important. You got to keep a close eye on that, because that's really the telltale signs of who might be behind it. So,
right. Who benefits?
Exactly, who benefits from it? Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
Go
excuse
ahead.
me, it's like Guy Fawkes. You know,
Yes.
I don't know. You know about what? Do you know about Guy Fawkes in America?
Yeah.
Yeah. V for victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
V for Vendetta.
Vendetta.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I'm such an idiot. Yes.
A lot of people think that he was a patsy as well, and he wasn't the actual person that wanted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. But I'm going off. I'm going on to another story here, but yeah, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's I think an important thing too. I don't really have it in my notes, but an important note I'd like to make on patsies is just because somebody might claim that like Lee Harvey Oswald is a patsy. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald is an innocent man. It just means he didn't do the specific thing that he's being arrested for. Lee Harvey Oswald could have been he could have done a lot of bad things, and he could have maybe had plans to kill JFK. But the point of calling him a patsy is to say that that specific event was not perpetrated by him. And I think a lot of people
Right.
take that. A lot of people misconstrued that as well. They think, "Oh, you're calling him a patsy, so you're saying he's innocent. You're saying like he was, put up like he didn't have anything to do with it." No, he might have had something to do with it. He just might have not exactly known what his hand in it was.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. That makes sense. Not his doesn't mean that they're the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
They could still be connected, but not have done the exact act that they're accused of doing.
Exactly.
What I think is good to note, and I think that we should always ask ourselves when things happen, is who benefits?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good point that you brought up, that who would benefit from this happening? And we see the next day
Yeah.
Hitler's power grab, right?
Yep.
And that's obviously who benefited.
Yeah. So not only those restrictions, but the politically driven event put the Nazi agenda in full swing and catapulted them to the majority among most of Germany. So at that point, the communists were, I think before the Reichstag burned down, the Nazis only had 12 seats in the 56 seat parliament. Now they're a majority. So that one event completely turned it around for them. So, I mean, hindsight's 2020, and that event alone led to a very noticeable stain in history with the imprisonment of thousands of communists and the obvious tragic events of World War II following it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, so just that one event, it's very key. And the event, it's like, oh, they burned down a building. Why would they do that? Why would the own German people burn down a German building? Well, it's like, you gotta kind of look at what happens after and see what the plan is.
Right.
Do you know what's crazy about that though? They blame the communists for starting the fire and burning down the parliament, but then all the restrictions that were put on like you said about the next day.
Exactly.
That sounds like communism.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Weird. Yes, that's right.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You kind of want to point. You kind of want to make a boogeyman. You want to make the public fear something, and then you want to say that this person is the face of that fear, and that helps with your agenda. And if you're making the public fear something, then obviously you want to point that. If you're doing that yourself, you want to point that into a different direction, not at yourself. You want to make your actions less noticeable and justify them by what
Yes.
can happen. Yeah.
But well, justify. I'm now protecting you from
Yeah.
that fearful thing.
Exactly.
That's throughout history. That's been the motivation for so. I mean, look, even like I'm gonna go religious here for a second, but that was the basis for why Jesus was nailed to the cross, because they made him the face of what should be feared.
Yeah.
You know, he,
Yeah.
he was an apostate and is fearful, and look what he's doing. And I think fear makes people. It's so funny because there's scientific studies that show that some people's brains are geared to make decisions on fear,
Hmm.
and some people's brains aren't. I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but um, a lot of people have a specific section of their brain that just gets really agitated and starts to overpower the rest of their brain if they are in fear.
Yeah.
And I think that we see that happen throughout history, that a lot of decisions are based on letting somebody protect you,
Hmm.
and it ends up not being for the best.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are a few instances of planned events that are backed up by documents that I want to get into. But before
Okay.
I get into those, I want to kind of let you guys in on a couple of rules that I like to follow whenever I gauge whether or not something's fishy to me.
Okay.
First, I like to think about the cause. So the cause in this case is a fire started and destroyed the German parliament. And it was a politically driven pyromaniac and three other communists, by the way, set fires that would intentionally and very obviously be blamed on their own communist party to, quote, help the communist working class. So that right there is a direct contradiction. Why would you do that when you know that the fallback's going to be on the people you're trying to help? Like
Right.
Rob said, it's very odd that, they're like, oh, the communists are burning stuff down. Let's restrict everybody. Let's do some very communist tactics right now. Like,
Right.
it's a very contradicting thing. So, and then after that, I would like to look at the effect. So, like I was talking about, the events that happen after. And in this case, legislation was pushed to conform and subdue all of Germany to the will of who? The Nazi Party, leading to one of the most memorable and destructive dictatorships of relevant recent history. So, I mean, that's a red flag right there to be like, well, maybe the Germans didn't lose very much when they burned out whenever the parliament was burned down. It was kind of a blessing
Right.
for them, like, or the Nazi
Yeah.
Party, at least, not all of Germany, but
Right.
yeah,
Can I ask you something about the restrictions?
yeah.
How did they justify limiting um, gatherings and the newspapers and conversations? Was it to restrict communists from being able to gather together?
Yes, it was. The fire decree was in direct response to, quote, communist aggression. So this was all seen as an act of a communist party's aggression and ability for violence. So they wanted to limit that and say that they were protecting everybody by saying, "Oh, we'll look through your letters to make sure nobody's planning to burn down your house, and we'll look through and listen in and make sure nobody's planning any crazy stuff." Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they just justified it by fear, making people think they were in danger, so they needed someone to protect them.
Okay.
Yeah. And a couple other rules, too, is, people always say follow the money. I think a paper trail is a very, very important one. And there's also a lot of these events have blood trails. I mean, World War II is a very, very noticeable stain in history that I don't think will ever be even. I mean, I read something the other day on Reddit. 80 million or 80 million people died in World War II. 55 million of those were civilians.
Wow.
55 million of the 80 million. That's
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
And arguably, in a turn of events, that was just a building being burned down. I mean, there's a lot of things that played into it, but with the majority and the ability for the Nazi Party to take hold of Germany like that, that was a direct reaction to the Reichstag burning.
Wow.
Yeah, that
That's
small.
crazy.
It seems very small when it's happening, but hindsight.
Right.
Yeah. So each event not only has a paper trail, but also has a blood trail. The paper trail, or following the money, is used to identify the true perpetrators or parties that had something to gain from the event. The blood trail essentially is the effect that the event had on history, and is used to basically follow who the enemies of the perpetrators might have been, and if the enemies are being killed, then maybe we know who's behind it. If the communists are being put into camps and tortured and killed, then who opposed the communists? And we all know who. So the many believe that we're living in a blood trail right now after 9/11, with things like the needless wars that we've been in, and the arms deals, and the TSA, and the Patriot Act, and countless other changes that came directly after 9/11. I mean, like,
Oh yeah.
night and day.
Oh yeah.
The world was
Those were
completely
all
changed.
fear-based.
Yeah, completely changed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, can I stop real fast and tell you that Adolf Hitler is in the chat. So if you want to ask him if he burnt that building down, now's the time. Yeah, right after 9/11, we had the TSA and all that stuff starting, and people, you could see that like there was nobody against that type of thing because we wanted protected.
Chaser,
Yes.
what does TSA mean?
TSA. It's
Yeah.
the Transit Security
Yes, Transit Security Agency.
Agency. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
you.
well, Rob, that's what I'll explain it, I guess, for anybody who doesn't know. So the TSA was started so that the security would be tighter at airports, which they've had lots and lots of what studies show that it actually hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
So that's why we started having to be x-rayed and patted down and take your shoes off. And you can't take containers larger than 4 ounces onto an airplane. That's when all those restrictions started. So that's why if you got on an airplane, you can't take your shampoo. So they implemented those pretty quickly after 9/11. And like you have to take your shoes off because remember right after that was the shoe bomber guy.
Yep.
Yeah, so
and that didn't
then
go very well for him.
Yeah, that didn't go very well for him at all. He's actually don't get me. I'll go way off topic. He is actually at a maximum security prison in, I think it's Denver, Colorado.
Oh.
That is so maximum security that they don't even know where they are in the prison.
Oh.
Yeah, so that they can't notify anybody where they are in the building.
Dang.
No windows. It's really weird, but so that's what the TSA is. That's what happened through that, Rob. And for anybody who doesn't know.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I want to ask Rob something that I just thought of just now. So Rob, do you remember when CCTV was established over there?
Oh dear, no, I don't remember. I know that it happened sort of all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it was everywhere. Sort of, it wasn't gradual.
Yeah.
It was really, really quick.
Which makes it seem like it's a reaction to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Hitler said it was the commies.
Of course. Dang it, commies.
And Diabolical Witness says he thinks that ICE was started at the same time. And I think you're right about that.
He is correct, yes. I forgot to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, the immigration. That particular department, I think you're right about that.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I just wanted to tell you the two comments that were in there.
No, you're good. Yeah, I'd be interested to see when CCTV was established, because like Rob said, it was a very quick thing. It seems very reactionary, and it's widespread. Like you can't go anywhere.
Is CCTV the cameras that
Yes.
like record you on the road and
24/7, 365.
Right.
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yeah, and it's a very like
Yeah, that's weird.
authoritarian kind of thing too. We kind of just, I mean, people in Britain, I guess, kind of just accept it. But if they were asked that like today, they'd probably be like, "Hey, why do you want to put cameras everywhere? What about privacy?" But I guess people just kind of went with it,
Right.
unless it was, I don't know. I'd like to look into that and see, you know.
Well, I don't know if they have them anymore, but there used to be websites where you could go and look through those different cameras.
Yeah, I saw that recently.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know if I still can, but I used to be able to go and look at cameras on the streets in my hometown, and you could watch the traffic, and that's really weird, actually.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see who has the rights to those cameras. Sorry if there's a dog barking in my background, by the way.
That's okay.
Because I would think that the government, like the parliament and things like that, those people would be in charge. But I'm assuming it's probably a private business that's putting up all those cameras, because
Right.
who exactly
Well, yeah.
is looking through that footage and determining things? Because I mean,
Right.
here in the United States, those cameras that we have on the intersections, those aren't through the state; those are through contractors. So like when you get that ticket in the mail, that contractor is on that ticket, and it's a private business saying, yeah, we have a contract with the state to put these up, but it's not an official state required thing. There's even some stop signs that if they don't have the sticker on the back, legally within the amendments, you're not obligated to stop at those stop signs that don't have that state required sticker on it, because those were put up by private companies.
Lots.
Yeah, those were put up by private companies who were just paid to put those up. They're not necessarily legal stop signs.
Okay, so I need to read you something.
Yeah.
2 things by Diabolical Witness. 11 days after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge was appointed as the first director of the Office of Homeland Security in the White House. And that's the first thing. And that's another thing that started after 9/11 is they did the Homeland Security. And I hated that name because it sounded, strangely enough, very similar to the way that the Germans spoke in World War II.
Yeah.
And then she said that she's in the data field, and 99.9% of all data from these cameras and sensors is not reviewed or analyzed.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they said.
There.
That's what they kind of said when Snowden came out with all that stuff. Is like, yeah, all this data is being collected, but we can't even really get into it. We don't even know. There's just too much. It's oversaturation of it. It's like, well, why do you have it up there then? Why are you putting resources into that?
I can tell you that in Texas, if like how we are on, I don't know what is the freeway? What's the freeway that we
44?
take to Dallas? They have cameras on that, and if you drive that too many times, you're flagged for possible drug trafficking.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Joking.
No, seriously.
That's out of an Orwell. That's like Orwellian.
Orwellian. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And
wow.
I used to think about that because I was driving into Dallas 2 days a week for physical therapy, and another 2 days a week I was going in for Joshua's volleyball training. And I would think, oh my gosh, like 4 days a week I'm traveling to Dallas and back.
Yeah.
And so I'm probably flagged.
Well, I mean, you're on lists for other things too.
Well, yeah,
We're looking at the podcast we're on right now.
Yeah, like the podcasts are like, okay, check.
Yeah.
They're gonna be. That's why they put that eagle at the Denver airport. They're like, we're gonna watch for.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, she's gonna be here pretty soon, so we need to keep an eye on her.
You're right. Okay, so go ahead.
All right, so
let me see. Let me check in this. See. That is policy. Certain routes license plates are OC red by Diabolical Witness. So, yeah. remember that when you're
Yeah.
going on a route a lot.
That's scary because I mean cops and especially in the drug enforcement field they don't interact with people like normal human beings. So
Well, yeah.
if I was flagged for
And,
something like that, I kind of don't know how that situation would go.
and by the way, OC Red is called optical character recognition.
That's another thing
So
too.
that's some good information.
Isn't CCTV being upgraded for facial recognition too, or unless it already has it?
I heard that too.
Yeah, like in the next few
See,
years.
stuff
or
like
something.
that stuff like that bothers me.
That is straight out of 1984,
Yeah.
the Orwell book.
Yeah.
So is Jory, by the way.
Hey, is he still here?
Ooh, boy.
Whoa, easy with that.
All right, go ahead.
Alrighty, so I'll get into some of the confirmed planned events. I won't call them false flags because they didn't happen, but some planned events that our government had. So the first is the Gulf of Tonkin. And I think that's a pretty well-known one.
Yeah.
And so the Gulf of Tonkin is on the second day of August in 1964. The USS Maddox was, quote, attacked by 3 Vietnamese torpedo boats, North Vietnamese torpedo boats, resulting in the death of 4 North Vietnamese sailors and the wounding of 6 more, and there were no U.S. casualties on that. So the USS Maddox only had a single bullet hole, apparently, from the battle, like only one.
Right.
And it was a pretty minor thing compared to, the 4 people that died and 6 more that were hurt. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, it sounded like you were going to say something.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
So only 2 days later, very like the Reichstag, a very quick reaction. Only 2 days later, a supposed second attack took place, according to the NSA. Upon later investigation, the second attack was proved to have been a product of, quote, false radar imagery due to, quote, freak weather effects. And that's according to U.S. Naval Task Commander Captain Herrick. This, in turn, left the first event in question as well. As per declassified files between President Lyndon Johnson and Captain Herrick, showed signs of pressure from Secretary McNamara and the president himself to go forward with the narrative involving the first 2 attacks as, quote, communist aggression, just like the Reichstag.
Right.
So, I mean, history repeats itself, and people kind of keep looking past the same things that keep happening. I mean, there's not a lot of ways to deceive somebody, but there are a lot of ways for that person to fall into the deception. And
right.
I think the game that they're playing has been a game that they've played for a while. It's just we're the ones reacting to it differently. We can react out of fear, we can react out of sympathy, we can react out of a lot of different things. And in reality, the same things keep happening. It's the same kind of narrative. So Captain Herrick was he in the declassified files was pressured by McNamara and the president to go forward with this, and they went forward with it, and that in turn led to the Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty, which, with tensions in the regions already at a boiling point, it gave Johnson authority to conduct military operations in Southeast Asia without a declaration of war. So the Gulf of Tonkin incident was, if not the main driving factor between the U.S. involvement in the controversial Vietnam War, because it gave Johnson that authority to be like, this isn't technically a war, but we can send our troops in now. This communist aggression has given us justification to act. And I don't think there's a substantial point to prove on whether or not the first attack took place at all, but there are testimonies from the naval. I don't think it was from the people on the USS Maddox, but it was from another carrier that they had contact with, that said they were under impression that the USS Maddox was leading the torpedo boats into territory where they could fire upon them without repercussion. So it kind of seems like it was a baited type attack, if it took place at all. Which, I mean, 4 saved lives, so I'm assuming it took place. But it's just the devil's in the details, you know.
Right. I think that it took a couple decades, but I feel like it's being more widely accepted that the Gulf of Tonkin was, what's the word I'm trying to say? Set up for us to be an excuse for us to go into Vietnam.
Yeah. And like I said, hindsight's 2020. Like we have to wait and see what the events after tell us.
Yeah, war's a moneymaker.
Oh yeah, for sure. So my favorite, well, I shouldn't say favorite, but my, I think, the piece of evidence that correlates 9/11 to, other events is Operation Northwoods.
Jeremy?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can I tell you that Deity Paranormal says that Jim Morrison's father was on that ship in the Gulf of Tonkin?
On the USS Maddox?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Had he already
For those
had
of you
Jim?
who don't, he must have already had Jim.
Jim died young, so I don't really know like what his age really was.
Yeah, he was in the 27-year-old
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, so if he was 27, then yes, he must have already had Jim. And for those of you that don't know, Jim Morrison is the lead singer of The Doors. Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to keep you up to date on what's being talked about in the chat as well.
No, you're good. That's interesting. Like, that.
Yeah.
There's so many correlations even with 9/11 with the people who were in the towers and people who were going to the towers, like famous people, relation to them, and like, so those things I think are pretty important. Not to just like say, oh, that's a pretty funny fact, but to kind of put it in perspective that it could have been anybody who could be, killed in one of these attacks or one of these events. And I think that's, I mean, me and you talked about this. People get very up in arms whenever you kind of question 9/11. And it's a very reactionary thing. And their main thing, the feet that they stand on is, well, you're disrespecting the memory of the victims. And it's like, no, let's look at this. I'm more so doing this in the memory of the victims. These people died, and I'm the one, acknowledging that and saying we need actual answers. Like, we need to actually know why these people died. I'm not just going to be satisfied with they died and we're going to do something. We don't really know if these people were behind it, but we're going to do it. I think being against their memory would to just be fold your arms behind your back and say, yep, guess they're dead. Nothing we can do now. No, there's something we can do. There are people who are accountable, and those people need to, justice needs to be brought. So I think it's a very hypocritical thing when people take that stance. But I mean, I get it. I don't think those people are, doing it out of ill will. They're doing it, They feel like they're justified in being like, no, that's really disrespectful to talk about the dead like that. It's like, no, we're talking about it because those people died. If nobody was hurt, we wouldn't really be talking about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who get upset about it because they feel like you're disrespecting the, if we're talking about conspiracy theory, that would likely involve people high up in the government.
Yeah.
I think that they get upset about that, questioning, the people in the government and that kind of thing. But I think that historically, it's proven that part of our job, especially in America, part of our job is to question our government.
Yes, that's a true patriot. That's the definition of a true patriot. It's not somebody who just says, oh, yes, America, you can do no wrong. No, that's a nationalist. That's not a patriot.
That's right. It's right there in the Constitution.
Yeah.
That, we need to question people in authority and take action if need be.
For the betterment.
So, right. So it's not, to let everybody know, we're not being disrespectful in these podcasts by presenting questions.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's really, I think, in time, just like I said that, like 87% of the American people believe that JFK wasn't assassinated by Jeremy
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald. And it's, I think in time, people sort of relax to be able to accept information better.
Mhm.
And what's really confusing to me is like 87% of the Americans believe that he wasn't assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. On the other hand, those 87% of Americans aren't asking or demanding to know then who did it,
Exactly.
who was involved with it, because some of those people are still alive.
Exactly.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I think, can you imagine if it did turn out to be true that it was something to do with the American government? How scared people that would scare people so much that it would just be the fear of. I think it's easier to just think that what happened was down to what's his name?
The boogeyman.
Someone who acted alone.
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
That it's easy for people to believe that it's packed away in a nice little package.
Yeah.
Completely.
It's convenient.
I understand that. Yeah.
But the reality is, which is what people couldn't accept, is that that their government was behind it, and all them people lost their lives, and the government was responsible. I think that's really, really scary.
Yes.
To think that.
For the record, I'm not claiming the government was behind it.
But the thought would
Rob
be scary.
just did.
if they were.
I think that's why. Yeah, I think that's why. Another reason why people get upset, because it is too frightening to imagine the immense implications.
Yeah.
It's like finding out your dad's a serial killer. Like.
Yeah, seriously though. That in literal terms, the person or people that you expect to take care of you, to find out, like your dad is a serial killer, is the exact same kind of a scenario.
Yeah.
To find out that the people who are supposed to keep you safe could be the people that harmed us, and therefore that's not something. I think that if it is true, if the conspiracy theories are true, and that is what happened, I think it's gonna be decades before people can openly discuss it, just like the JFK thing.
Yeah.
Because then most of the people involved will have passed, and that makes it less scary.
Yeah.
That you don't want to talk about it if they're still involved in government right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's also, I mean, for me, and I know a lot of people, I'd be very, it'd take a hit to me as well if I found that out, because you put your trust in the government and for most of your life if you live on the grid, and it's like to know that you put your trust in someone when not everybody, but a lot of people were saying don't trust them, and then it comes to light that you shouldn't have trusted them. It kind of hurts yourself, you don't want that. You kind of want to live in denial and be like, no, I'm doing right, I'm making the right choice, like I should put my American flag out on my house and be patriotic, when reality like that might not be the case.
And that's another thing, they sort of question your patriotism. If you want to discuss what happened with 9/11, they question your patriotism, which, like we discussed, is it's patriotic to question. That is what's patriotic. But it would affect. I think the effect on the American people would be astronomical. I mean,
Yes.
where do you go from there? Where do
Yeah.
you go from there? If they started arresting people for their role in 9/11, like big people, like let's just choose somebody, like let's choose Dick Cheney.
Yes, please. Let's choose him.
Don't choose him to go hunting with, but let's choose him for this, and
Not unless you
say that
like the taste of buckshot.
I don't. It's an acquired taste. Let's say that Dick Cheney was arrested right now, and for being involved in the 9/11 attacks, and then everybody, the chain of command that went along with that, it would rock this country to its core.
Yep.
I mean, who are you going to vote for in any other election?
Yeah.
Who would you vote for? It would leave. I don't even know. You would just like it. It would make people not even want to have a government. You know what I mean? So I understand. Chaos. It would be chaotic. You're right.
It'd be
chaotic.
I feel like it'd be a very weird sort of like passive anarchism or anarchy.
Yeah.
Like it'd be like there'd be a lot of just giving up, honestly. Because I mean, you think of the way society lives in America. You're cataloged as soon as you come out. Like you're as soon as you're born, you got
given a number.
You're given a number, and if you do anything wrong, we know where to find you. We know what you look like. Like it's a very institutionalized way of life in America. So, it'd be just like it'd be catastrophic, and I think people wouldn't be able to process life beyond that, because it'd be like, well, I've lived my life under this guise of the government, and what do I have, like, if this all falls apart? Do I stay with my dad who's the serial killer, because if I don't, I'm homeless, or like what? Like,
yes,
like,
yeah, it would be and I completely understand that.
Yeah,
I completely understand how people would want to just, like Rob said, keep it in that box and just live your life, because it would be too much to handle. And like I said, there's scientific studies that show that there are people who are more fear-based and people than other people. And I think that they would come out and say, well, they did it for the greater good of something. There would be an excuse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And there would have to be, honestly. They'd have to settle you back down, rock you. It was for the greater good. There was something else happening you didn't know about.
Yeah.
And we had to stop that. And so everybody would kind of like, be soothed back down into passive. But
they've done it before, haven't they? Allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly, yes.
I mean, Pearl Harbor.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of conflicting stuff on that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what basically brought the Americans into the war, weren't it?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
And the nuclear bomb that was dropped over Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was all to do with Pearl. Well, sort of. That was the after effects of Pearl Harbor.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And people said that the American government knew that there was going to be an attack. They could have stopped the attack at any time.
Yes.
But they just left everything. It's like with 9/11 and the Twin Towers. There's certain people didn't go to work that day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but certain people didn't go to work that day, and it's as though a lot of people knew.
There were certain things being traded on Wall Street.
Yeah.
Leading up to that, and
in even more direct correlation between Pearl Harbor and 9/11 is, I mean, the attacks were orchestrated by planes, and there's a lot of reports of stand down orders on Pearl Harbor where people were like, we know that there's zeros in the sky, but it's a drill, just chill. And there's literal documentation and TSA audio where they're like, "Is this a drill or not?" on 9/11, where they're like, "Is this a drill?" I think it's Operation Vigilant Guard or something like that. And I don't want, like I said, I don't want to jump ahead, but like, I mean, that's a direct thing where it's like they were told to stand down so the attack could take place. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Well,
pretty. Go ahead.
if you watch the video of JFK being assassinated, his CIA agent, CIA, not CIA, that's not, his Secret Service agent was called off of his car, which never happens. You
Yeah.
can see him being called off. He turns around and he's putting his arms up in the air like, "What are you doing? Why are we doing this?" And JFK gets shot. So,
That
and those are the things that make people question and say, "What?"
that's a really good thing we should bring up too. Is these events we like to say, well, if Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it, then the government did it. Well, it may not be that simple. I mean, the governments could have known, but they maybe could have just decided not to act on it. And that's what
Right.
in turn caused the event. They might have wanted the event to happen, but said, we're not going to do it ourselves. You know?
Right.
We're going to let
right.
someone do it. And that's a pretty important distinction, I think. Because, I mean, when you point the finger at the government, you better have something to back it up.
Right.
But I think it could
Right,
be
yeah.
that, too. Like, people just were ordered to stand
Yeah.
down, and people were just ordered to let it happen. And they're just as
Right.
guilty, but not necessarily
Yeah.
the ones who did it, quote, you know.
Right.
You can't
Right.
keep just saying, well, it's a coincidence that this and that
Yeah.
this happened, and you can't just keep saying that all the time. You know, eventually someone has got to take some kind of responsibility for this,
Exactly.
because what's the next thing going to be? You know, there could be another terror attack, and then it could be that people think there's a conspiracy. Well, you can't keep doing it. Pearl Harbor, the thing with Hitler burning down the thing, everything. I mean, there's so many.
Well,
This is
wait
a
to hear this
question of
next
what.
one.
This
Yeah,
is a
okay.
question I wanted to ask you. Do you believe that Hitler and George Bush were both sort of were just a figurehead, and just the orders were coming from a lot higher than, because at the end of the day Hitler was an idiot.
He was an Austrian who wasn't even Aryan either.
I
Yeah,
know.
he was. I mean,
Yeah, I
couple of
know.
years-
Isn't that weird?
a couple of years before he became the Adolf Hitler that we all know, he was a homeless artist who was just an idiot, like a village idiot. And I'm not being funny. I don't mean to upset any of my American friends, but George Bush is a little bit of a village idiot as well.
Oh, you're not upsetting anybody. We all know that one.
Yeah, I don't. In all honesty, I think that I don't think George Bush had anything to do with 9/11.
Me either.
First off, I think that there's a lot of history with the Bush family and who they were involved with and all this stuff. But I don't think that when push comes to shove that, first off, that George Bush would be, I think it's possible that he was like told you're going to react this way or do this.
Mhm.
But I don't think that he's somebody who's an evil genius mastermind.
Oh,
You
no.
know, like not
Yeah,
like
and
that
if
Dick
you-
Cheney.
If you go back and you look at Hitler too, like how Rob was asking if he was a figurehead, he wasn't obviously a great military commander in the beginning, and he was kind of viewed in the Nazi Party as just kind of like somebody that was there. But the people who were in power in the Nazi Party originally, I don't think they called it the Nazi Party, it was something else. But they could see that he was very charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he spoke and told stories, he was very like hand gesturing and very loud and everybody surrounded him because he spoke so well.
Yeah.
And he had the same ideas, but he just wasn't very high in the party. And they figured, hey, if we make this guy influential in our party, he's going to be able to get more people involved with us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it was kind of just putting gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
He wasn't so
Yeah.
much being a figurehead so much as it was kind of like just letting the dog off the leash and letting him do whatever he wanted. And of course, it turned into what it was.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing about Hitler, was that he was so charismatic
Mhm.
that people really followed him into the dark side.
Well, he could make anybody believe anything the way he spoke. It's
Oh, yeah.
a lot of dictators in history. If they're when you get right down to it, most of them aren't even that smart, but they speak so well that you can't help but believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
It's more powerful than people think.
Yep. All right,
Yeah,
Jeremy.
Yeah,
You want to?
I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
So-
go ahead.
So this one is a doozy. This one's, I think, a pretty important set of documents, and this is backed up. I do want to apologize. I haven't been putting pictures up. I've been totally enthralled in the conversation. I totally forgot. So yeah,
That's okay.
I missed the Reichstag and I missed the Tonkin, but I will have pictures of the Northwoods documents that I'm about to talk about. So I'll put those up right now. And so I want to talk about Operation Northwoods. Now, this is, I think, the most related as far as plans for 9/11 and the idea and just kind of a good outline on how the government was thinking and how they'd be able to pull off something if they did, hypothetically speaking. So Operation Northwoods, with less than satisfactory botching of the Bay of Pigs invasion by President Kennedy, the chairman and every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff put to paper an anti-communist plan codenamed Operation Northwoods. I have the pictures of the documents up, and you can find them online as well. They've been declassified. So these set of documents called for, quote, innocent people to be shot on American streets, boats carrying refugees fleeing from Cuba to be sunk on the high seas, for waves of violent terrorism to be launched in D.C., Miami, and elsewhere. Where? This is a direct quote from the documents themselves, signed by every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it gets a lot worse. Go ahead.
When was this?
This was 1962.
Wow.
Yeah. This was when the plan was established by the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a, quote, anti-communist plan. Yeah, the subject is justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. So this was their plans to catapult and push forward the Cuba situation. So, and this ties right into 9/11. So this is a direct quote as well. Planes to be hijacked and bombed using phony evidence pointing to Cuban Fidel Castro as an excuse for public and international backing for a war with Cuba. Now, this sounds like I'm speculating, but if you look up these documents, and I have one of them up on the screen right now, these are direct quotes from the documents themselves. These are plans within the documents, signed by the Secretary of Defense. So this was obviously something that, when they botched the Bay of Pigs, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were like, all right, well, what can we do? How can we speed up this altercation with Cuba? We need to. I mean, like you said, war is money. There's a lot of reasons we want to go to war with Cuba, and way less reasons on why we don't. So let's get the ball rolling, is what the government was thinking. But with the help of President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, the plan was scrapped, and it was scrapped against the will of General Lemonster's advice, and no war was launched. But the fact still stands that the U.S. government had plans to kill scores of innocent Cubans and Americans to satiate their sadistic appetite for war. And the plans go as far as to, quote, explode the rocket-carrying John Glenn, who was the first American to orbit Earth, to, quote, provide irrevocable proof that the communists of Cuba agree to violent extensions against the virtues of truth, freedom, and democracy which America holds. Yes. And the plans continued.
Wow.
Yeah, the plans continued. For instance, a quote series of terror, which this is kind of when the coin early on before 9/11, the coin or the term terror and terrorism was starting to really, find its way into U.S. documents. But quote, a series of terror would take place at the U.S. Navy base at Guantanamo Bay. And this would include dressing U.S. or ally forces up in Cuban military uniforms and having them, quote, start riots at the main gate, pose as saboteurs within the base, and ammunitions would be blown up, fires would be started, aircraft would be sabotaged, and even mortars would be fired at the base to cause damage to the U.S.-Cuban installation. And that's, again, a quote from the documents themselves. And these documents are irrefutable too. This isn't a conspiracy theory. The events didn't happen, obviously, but the plans were in writing. And without the intervention of the Kennedys, it might have happened.
Wow. Well, and part of the reason we wanted to take control of Cuba was that they were going to allow Russians to put missiles in Cuba that could reach the United States.
Exactly.
So by taking over Cuba, Russia wouldn't have the ability to hit the United States with a missile from Russia. So we had to get in and control Cuba.
Yeah, and Cuba...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Can you imagine if it wasn't JFK and it was someone like George Bush who was pulling the strings? Then maybe it would have happened.
Why possibly?
If it was JFK wasn't a warmonger, so if it hadn't
Exactly.
What they call them, war hawks or something like that.
Warmonger.
Sorry,
yeah.
I just hit my microphone. He wanted to make sure, wanted to try a peaceful way first. So imagine, right, if it was somebody who was more inclined towards just striking,
Yeah.
history would be completely different.
Somebody who say... Go ahead.
And we could be sitting here talking about the conspiracy of how we went into Cuba.
Yeah. That'd be...
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't know those. We wouldn't know those plans right now. It would be because they wouldn't have released them
Exactly.
if it had happened. And now we would just be talking about that, and people would be calling people who talk about that unpatriotic or, crazy or anybody, because there's a lot of strange conspiracy theories. So you're kind of lumped in with, when you're looking at conspiracy theories, you're lumped in with a lot of crazy stuff.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So and that's the easy way to dismiss people who are asking questions, actually.
Yeah.
But I just can't. I mean, they were having, my mom and my dad were having drills where they were at that time, and the same tornado sirens we hear once a month, Jeremy, are the same sirens that they had that would go off, and these kids would hide under their desks. Like that's going to protect you from a nuclear bomb. Not likely, but
Yeah.
it's that recent that my parents remember very well, those sirens going off in those drills.
I didn't even grow up in that time, but I have stress dreams all the time about nuclear and tornadoes, like nuclear bombs going off and tornadoes going off. So for you to tell me that correlation between the two, it's like,
Yeah. Oh, that noise, that alarm, that siren, it sends fear to my bones.
yeah.
And I wasn't having to listen to it in correlation with a nuclear attack. And there's a comment that says if history had been different, we could be flying a hammer and a sickle instead of stars and stripes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can see what just burning down one building can do. Like,
Right.
things happen and people don't really see the progress when it's right in front of them. It's something you can only look back at unless you're very think of the word. Observant, I guess.
Right.
I can remember when I was in the army during the 80s and 90s, and a really big part of our training was nuclear, chemical, and biological warfare, and we were trained really, really. We did a lot of training, and it was a real threat then that it could happen. I don't know about today, but it was a massive part of our training. I think if there's anyone in the chat who was in the army, sort of around the same time or in the military, I think they will say the same. You know, we were preparing for a nuclear war.
Wow.
It's terrifying.
Diabolical Witness says in the chat that he had to practice nuclear drills by hiding under their wooden desks at school.
Yeah. It's terrible, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You try and put it in perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's put into perspective. Jory's wife today had to go to training on what to do if there's a school shooting because she's her first day of teaching is Monday. And so today she went to a class to teach her what to do in case there's a school shooter. And, you know, that's a scary teaching day.
Yeah.
When you have to go for that training. Jory, are you here? Jory?
Oh god, the government got him.
Oh no.
Rob's next.
Yeah, Rob, don't answer your door.
Don't answer your door, Rob.
I'm in a hotel somewhere. Nobody knows.
Undisclosed location.
All right, go ahead, Jeremy.
Do we want to try to get Jory back, or?
Yeah, did he get...
No, I'm here.
Oh, hello.
You guys couldn't have ignored me.
Oh, well, I was talking about Kendra.
Oh.
And her training today.
What? Oh, yes, it was very distracting with the hot officer.
Well, besides that, yeah, there was a hot guy teaching the class, so there was a silver lining.
Yes. It's hard
Corporal
to be so
something
depressed
or
when you're so beautiful. I think his name was Corporal Handsome.
That's funny. Okay. Oh, by the way, goodbye, Victor. I'm glad you came. All right. Go ahead, Jeremy. We got Jory back.
All right.
He fell asleep.
So the list goes on, and there's other plans, but I think the ones with the hijacking of planes and, you know, the bombing and sinking of, you know, innocent people, is pretty important because there's something that Bush stated after 9/11 where he said, quote, "I don't think anyone could have envisioned flying planes into buildings. Certainly not us. Even though Operation Northwoods documents state very clearly the contrary."
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but they had been warned.
Yes.
It was
Numerous times.
Clinton, right when they were changing, switching presidencies. Clinton was warned that there was a threat of being attacked by planes being used as a weapon. So yeah, I think you did imagine it. Yeah. That's funny. Well, maybe George wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, he was reading a book upside down that day, so nobody's accusing him of being the brightest bulb.
definitely not. He wasn't the.
Bet someone,
Go ahead.
he can't even put his shoes on.
And people were throwing shoes at him to help.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They were like, "Here, take my shoe."
Here's my shoes. Learn to put this one on.
You just slip your foot in.
Well, is it necessary to throw it at my face?
Oh,
You gotta give him some credit for that, though. He dodged that pretty well.
Yeah, you know that same guy ran for office there, and I think he made it.
Oh, well, why wouldn't he make it? I mean, I'd vote for him.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry, I'm showing my bias. Sorry.
Yeah, we're not having bias,
Oh,
Jeremy.
yeah, sorry.
You know, this is a very liberal podcast, and I'm not having it.
I'm trying to keep this very middle of the road, but I think that most people agree that George Bush was, you know,
An
he was a
idiot.
little dim.
You could have ate a few shoes. You
Hey, I
wouldn't have
think Kanye said it best. George Bush doesn't like black people.
been mad. Yep.
Oh my, there goes my monetization. Thank you.
It was a quote. It's not that I said it.
Well, to put in perspective, I mean, Kanye West doesn't like black people anymore either, so.
Oh, no.
Whoa.
Oh, I've lost
That's
control.
not true. He
I've lost
loves
control.
everybody. He loves everybody.
Oh my goodness.
I will like to say that I am mixed, so don't give me any hate mail.
You just cut out. Nobody heard you say that.
Oh, well, that's fine.
just cut out.
Kanye,
That was so
Kanye
weird.
didn't want you to hear that.
Yeah, that was so funny. You go, I'd like to say it. It goes, cut out, cut out, cut out. So what, Jeremy, you'd like to say what?
I am indeed, what? Bless you. I'm indeed mixed, so,
You're mixed?
yeah, I'm not gonna say with what, but.
Okay.
You're mixed.
I'm mixed.
You're mixed.
Yeah.
Okay, up or?
Yeah, I'm mixed. I'm mixed up.
Okay, mixed, not stirred.
Not stirred, no.
Okay.
That ruins the
Oh
flavor.
my god. Do you got salt
I'm just
on your rib?
confused.
Jeremy
I'm
is
trying to-
biracial.
Yeah, trying to defuse the, my
So-
my comment about Kanye
He's
West.
trying to defuse the Kanye comment.
That's why you can't have me on the
Anyway.
podcast. I told you it was a bad idea. can't have me on here.
Hey, trust me, there's things that come out of my mouth on these podcasts, and later I'm like, oh, jeez.
It's a trade-off between necrophilia and comments about Kanye West's race
Yeah.
relations.
And necrophilia comes into the conversation.
Yeah.
It took what? An hour and 14 minutes.
I mean, it's always on my
I-
mind. I just gotta sprinkle it in.
I feel like at this point, necrophiliacs love this podcast. Like, this is the go-to for
We're cornering the market.
necrophiliacs to justify their ways. Yeah. They're like, hey, man,
We
you
should
listen
just
to
do
Exit Exit Light Live? Oh my god, they talked about us again.
Shout out.
Yeah. Shout out
To
to
my
all my
necrophilia family.
necrophiliacs hanging out at the cemetery tonight. Hope you get lucky.
Oh my gosh. Oh no. Wow, this took a turn. My next podcast series, necrophilia. Fact or fiction?
Hey, Halloween's fast approaching.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, please help us, Jeremy.
All right. I will get into the Bush bin Laden relation. So, you probably know a lot more about this than me. Most of the stuff I wrote was just put in from my own words, but this I'm grabbing from. I don't have the link on me, but I don't know how I'd get to it. Actually, sorry, I don't have the link for what I'm about to cite, but
Okay.
I didn't think that far ahead.
Okay.
But this is cited from a website that I won't disclose at the time, but it also cites a couple sources such as the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. So, not
Okay.
entirely,
Fake news.
yeah, fake news. So George Bush Sr. and Bin Laden Sr. are longtime standing business partners. So George Bush Sr. and the Bin Laden family are on the board of the Carlyle Group, a large defense contractor. I think large is an understatement. I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's one of, if not the biggest.
Yeah.
The Bin Laden family financed George Bush Jr.'s early failed businesses. James R. Bath, friend and neighbor of George W. Bush, was used as a cash funnel from Osama bin Laden's rich father, Sheikh bin Laden, to set George W. Bush's set George W. Bush up in business, according to reputable sources from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. The connection between, if anybody doesn't know, Bin Laden was the one that they said orchestrated the attacks that took place on 9/11, and George Bush was the president during that time.
Right, and it wasn't Saddam Hussein.
Yes, it wasn't Saddam Hussein, although we killed him too. Well, we didn't kill him, but we had him killed.
Well, yeah, we did kill him, didn't we?
Well, they hung him. You're right. Yeah, we didn't kill him ourselves, but we found him and handed him over and pretty much told him what to do.
Yeah.
So the connection between G.W. Bush and the Bin Laden family and the Bank Commerce Credit International, or BCCI, is well documented. The Bush dynasty has closer relations to the Bin Ladens than just about anyone else. George Bush Jr. arranged for the Bin Laden family to escape by U.S. private jet when everyone else was still under lockdown after 9/11.
Yeah, it was the only plane in the sky.
Yep. Bin Laden family were asked no questions. The Pakistan Secret Police, or ISI, which has close ties to the CIA, secretly airlifted several thousand members of the Al-Qaeda and perhaps Osama out of Afghanistan to safety shortly after 9/11. I think that's documented as well. I didn't bring a picture with me, but I did see the document that says that. There is a long and tangled history between the Bush family and the elite Saudi Arabia, and the elite of Saudi Arabia, including the Bin Laden family, which indeed are Saudis. They're not Afghanis or Pakistani. And we don't want to jump too far ahead, but that the Saudi Arabia plays into it because they had the hijackers had Saudi passports, if people didn't know. So, and I think most of them, if not, were Saudi.
Yes.
But they had no repercussions, obviously. We were like,
right.
Let's go for Afghanistan instead.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. So the history between them begins in the 1970s in Houston, Texas, when George W. Bush was just starting out his family's two businesses of politics and oil. The powerful and the very rich Bin Laden family helped fund his first venture into oil. The cozy friendship continued for decades. After a terrorist attack at the barracks in Saudi Arabia, which killed 19 Americans, the Bin Laden family received a multi-billion-dollar contract to rebuild. As you know, Tracy, the Bin Ladens have that business that is, if not the biggest, isn't it the biggest in that region to rebuild? Like it's a contracting business. Yeah. So basically, the dynamic they have is George drops bombs and Osama. Osama.
There you go. There's another conspiracy theory.
Yeah, showing my bias. Osama and his family's business rebuilds. That's the dynamic they have. That's the business venture. So George Bush Sr. was in a business meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington on the morning of September 11th with, you guessed it, one of Osama bin Laden's brothers. That's documented as well. While serving as governor of Texas, George W. met with high-level Al-Qaeda leaders hoping to get support to build a pipeline across Afghanistan. 4 months into his presidency, he rewarded the Taliban by handing over $43 million in May of 2001, only 4 months before the 9/11 attacks, to build that pipeline in Afghanistan to these then Al-Qaeda leaders.
Can I add a side note about the Bush family?
Sure.
Prescott Bush made his fortune by being the partner of a Nazi steel magnate, Fritz Tyson, who worked for Hitler.
Oh, wow.
And helped to make the steel for the guns and the tanks and everything. And him and Prescott Bush were partners.
Yeah.
And that's George W. Bush's grandfather.
Yeah, they go back.
Yeah, it's weird how the Bush family. And George Bush Sr. was a CIA director and involved with Kennedy, and it's a really, like, they're a huge. The Bush family has a huge mark on this country's history. It's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, when you brought up the relations they had with past Nazis, Operation Paperclip is a very, very, I think it's a problematic thing that we did, we being the U.S. government, when we brought, after World War II, we brought a bunch of Nazi scientists over and said, hey, want to work for us? You won't stand the Nuremberg trials, but, you'll launch us into space.
Yeah.
Quite literally. Our shuttles were built, and I think the Apollo shuttles especially were designed by an ex-Nazi scientist. So, that shows you that we're not exactly. We don't really care about the distinction between good and evil, or what. We just care about the distinction between money and how to advance our agenda. And we'll work with anybody, Bin Laden or Nazi, to push that forward.
Right.
And as history shows, most of the time when we work with them, we were either enemies before, or we're going to become enemies in the later years to come, as Bin Laden and the Bushes soon do.
Yes.
At least in the public's eyes.
Right.
Yeah. Because. Oh, sorry. So after. Oh, sorry, I got mixed up. All airlines in the United States were grounded for 2 days after 9/11. Yet on September 13th, 2001, the White House authorized 6 Saudi jets to fly Bin Laden family members from America to Saudi Arabia. That's also backed up. I think everybody pretty much knows that.
Yes.
Because that was covered on the news.
Yes.
Oh, everybody's grounded, but these planes are flying. It's a pretty noticeable thing.
Right.
The members of the Bin Laden family were never questioned by United States authorities either. Judicial Watch called for George Herbert Bush to resign from the Carlyle Group when it became known that Osama bin Laden was a major investor in the firm. And that's cited by Wall Street Journal, Judicial Watch, March 5th, 2001. After the September 11th terrorist attacks, Judicial Watch Chairman and General Counsel Larry Klayman said, quote, "This conflict of interest has now turned into a scandal. The idea of President George W. Bush's father, an ex-president himself, doing business with a company under investigation by the FBI in the terror attacks of 9/11 is horrible. President Bush should not ask, but demand that his father pull out of the Carlyle
Hello?
Group." Sorry, did I cut out?
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Tracy, can you hear me? I think she might have cut out.
Hello?
Give her a second to come back.
Tracy?
Hello?
Hello?
It's just flashed up that she's left.
She left?
Yeah.
Oh, 1 second, guys. Sorry about this. Let me try to add her back.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah, they got her.
That's it.
It's done so.
Bring her back to me, Donald Trump. How could you do this?
All the monetization and revenue from this channel will go to the recollection of Tracy. We'll pay the ransom once we get monetized. Come on, YouTube.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I guess. What do you guys think? Did you guys know about the relation between the Bin Ladens and the Bushes?
I remember watching the Michael Moore film, Fahrenheit 9/11,
Yeah.
and he talks about it a lot in that. It's just disgusting, to be quite. Well, that's what I've felt.
Yeah.
It's just spitting on all those victims, the way that they didn't even question them.
Yep.
You could at least have questioned them if they knew anything about him. They just let them leave the country.
Yeah.
It seems as if she's dropped and she's having trouble getting back. I guess ask her what she wants me to do. If she wants me to carry on, or if she wants me to try to. Sorry about that, guys. We're having a bit of technical issues. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty noticeable and well documented relationship that the two have. But whenever the events took place, the media like to point out Osama as if he was some rogue within the Bin Laden family who like had no connection with the United States in any way, and he's just acting alone and he's a terrorist. But there's a lot of correlation between the two that they didn't go into at all. And I think it would have been, it's very disrespectful, like Rob said, to not make that known to the people who were in the attack or who witnessed the attack or just anybody in general, and to kind of like, it's a bit like lying by omission, you know, like they're leaving that detail out that we had, you know, and we had and we still have relation to this family that killed 3,000 people in an attack. Like,
hello?
Hey.
Hello?
Welcome back.
Hey.
Welcome
I'm back. Thank you. Did you notice I was missing?
Is it just
Well,
me?
You were talking and we were talking back, but you couldn't hear us for some reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it just me, or does it sound like she has a gun pointed to her head? You sound a bit different, Tracy. I don't know.
Don't. I'm fine. Let's keep going.
If you're not fine, click your tongue 3 times. Okay, you're good then. Let's keep going. Oh, God. Don't Trump, we swear we'll be good. Please leave my mom alone.
I'm blinking my eyes.
Bin Laden who?
Yeah, blink your eyes
Never heard
3
of him.
times. We need to see it.
Yeah. Osama, what? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, Diabolical Witness goes, the timing is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back, so let's go. What did I miss?
That was it. Did you hear the quote from the General Counsel Larry Klayman, where he was asking?
Nope.
Okay, so this is a quote from the Judicial Watch Chairman and General Counsel Larryman. He said, or Counsel Larry Klayman. He said, quote, "This conflict of interest has now turned into a scandal. The idea of President George W. Bush's father, an ex-president himself, doing business with a company under investigation by the FBI in the terror attacks of 9/11 is horrible. President Bush should not ask but demand that his father pull out of the Carlyle Group." And Jory and Robb were just saying how, like, you know, it's disrespectful that, like, they left that part out whenever they reported on the pursuit of Osama. Like, they just kind of painted him as, like, just some random rogue black sheep, you know, like, had no ties to the U.S., just kind of is doing his own terror thing. But it's not the reality.
Well, are you gonna get into how Osama bin Laden got into power in the first place?
Yes, that's my next thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Because when you have all the information, it's even more strange that we acted like he was just, well, you know, there's always just a rogue guy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's even, go ahead.
Okay, so here's a few facts about Tim Osman, aka Osama bin Laden. So
wait, what?
Yeah.
That's his name?
This is his CIA code name, Tim Osman.
Oh.
Yep. So this picture I'm about to put up is not of him as Tim Osman, but I mean, work with me. So bin Laden has worked with the CIA since the 1970s, and this is documented as well. It's his involvement in pushing off the Soviets. His code name.
And you can, if you've ever, there's a movie called Charlie Wilson's War, and it stars Jeremy. Who's that actor that we told you was in Twister. Super famous. Three names.
Oh, the one who plays the dad and everything?
No, he died from a accidental heroin overdose, I think.
It wasn't Philip Seymour Hoffman, was it?
Yes,
Oh.
Philip Seymour Hoffman. Charlie Wilson's War stars Philip Seymour Hoffman and Tom Hanks, maybe. And it is about what Jeremy's going to talk about Osama bin Laden and how he was used. And so, if you are interested in seeing the backstory as a movie, I think. Oh my God, my brain is totally fried. Okay, Pretty Woman. What's her name?
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts is in the movie too as well, I believe. So thank you, Rob. Thank you.
Is it the gun to your head that's messing you up?
Yeah.
It's scaring me. It's hard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm nervous. Help me. So anyway, I just want to say that these events are, like Jeremy said, they are known events that and things that happen. These are facts, not opinions. Okay, sorry.
You're good. So the bin Laden family, being the second wealthiest family in Saudi Arabia, and the Bin Laden Corporation, one of the wealthiest corporations in the Middle East, they had bin Laden working with the CIA under the codename Tim Osman. And this is going on after their long history, 3 decades of being business partners with the Bushes. So I'll talk about his involvement or his work as Tim Osman in a second, but I want to give a little bit more backstory into the relation. So on the morning of 9/11, Bush Sr. was at a meeting with the bin Laden family in Washington. This is also documented. Over 180 members of the bin Laden family were airlifted out of the United States between September 11th and September 13th, 2001, whilst every other U.S. citizen was grounded. So now let's get into Operation Cyclone, the operation that pretty much led to the creation of Osama bin Laden, and the idea that we have of him now, and Al-Qaeda and the Mujahideen and all that. So Operation Cyclone's initiative was to train and arm Mujahideen groups to fight off the Soviet invasion during the middle of 1979. This is all factual. This is all documented. With Tim Osman, a.k.a. Osama bin Laden, at the helm of the newly formed and CIA-funded Afghan Arabs. Yes. These Afghan Arabs were Muslim volunteers from other countries, usually wealthy and pious, like Osama, a Saudi himself. They weren't, civilians who hate democracy or hate communists or hate anything and picked up AK-47s. No, these were volunteers from regions that weren't even Afghanistan, from wealthy families, and funded by the CIA, and led by Tim Osman, a.k.a. Osama bin Laden.
And Reagan was president. Is that correct?
Yes, 1979.
This is Reagan's CIA.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know, Reagan was that was when the Iran-Contra controversy happened with the CIA secretly having like a secret government, really, and selling arms. They were arms dealers. They became arms dealers and were secretly selling arms to arm people who would eventually become our enemies, like Osama bin Laden.
Exactly. So this group was funded several $100 million a year on their endeavors to fight back the Soviets. Nearly at the end of the Soviet War, this is the Soviet War in 1979, bin Laden then reorganized the groups into Al-Qaeda and carried on its jihad against other targets, namely the United States. This was seen as blowback for the U.S. and helped in the pinning of not only Osama but the war on terror altogether. So, in him doing that and controlling it himself, that made him an easier target for them to point the finger at him, basically, and say, "Oh, look at this bad guy," Even though even though he's there because of us, we,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, he was trained by us. He was armed by us.
Yep.
He was made by us.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Rob has to go. He's not feeling well.
Oh, sorry, Rob. Hope you feel better, bud.
It's okay, mate. I apologise. I'm really sorry.
Oh, you're good.
All right. Good night, Rob. Get some sleep.
Good night, Rob.
Good night. Feel better.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, like that kind of helped. Like we said, just because they're a patsy doesn't mean they're innocent. They
That's
have a
right.
hand. They just might not be in on the plan that occurred, and they might have not orchestrated it themselves and
Right.
carried it out themselves, like we like to believe with the lone gunman narrative all the time. We just keep using
Right.
that one over and over, like.
Yeah,
Oh,
he was a
goodness.
quiet guy. Kept
Yeah.
to himself.
So that's all I have to say on Operation Cyclone. There are documents you can look up that actually I have one right here. I'll put it on the stream. There are documents you can look up that name the people that I've mentioned and show the money and show the incentive. But I think, Tracy, if you have any more to say on that, you can say more, because I'm going to move on to something else after that.
Well, I just think it's interesting to note. I think that the connection between the Bush family and the Bin Ladens is something that I wish the media had concentrated more on,
Yes.
and had been brought to light on, because it is a large factor when you're talking about conspiracies and whatnot, that there are actual well-known facts
Yeah.
that lead people to question the events and who was involved. It's not unpatriotic. It's not crazy. They're not wacko conspiracy theorists. Osama bin Laden was weaponized by the United States of America. That is a fact, not an opinion. And something I say a lot is, your opinions don't get to equal my facts. And it's a well-known fact that the bin Laden family was given special treatment after 9/11, that it was hushed in the media, the connection to the bin Laden family. The war was directed away from the bin Laden family to Saddam Hussein, who had literally nothing to do with 9/11. And so it feels a lot like they were going, look over here, to distract us, like a magician, like with little kids.
Yeah,
They're having you look at the hand that isn't doing the trick.
exactly.
And that is why people question what comes next and what is told to us next, because this was kept completely out of the media. And the fact that when they knew who Osama bin Laden was, not because they had ground operatives or some secret back channel information. They knew who he was because he was on our bankroll.
Exactly.
So it wasn't because of us that our supernatural ability to know this information. We knew it all along, and we not only did we know it all along that we had trained him. He was on our bankroll. We had given the weapons. We knew he was turning on us,
Yep.
and had been warned about it. Clinton had been warned about it. Because like I said, it went back to Reagan. So there was Reagan, George Bush Sr., Clinton, and then G.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a secret. It was well known, and he should have been taken out a long time ago. But like you said, sometimes if an event is going to happen anyway, and you just kind of like, okay, let's turn our heads.
Yep.
This could be one of those events, because we knew for decades
Mm-hmm.
where this man was and what he was doing. I mean, we were giving him money.
Yeah.
So I think that when if you're inclined to be a person who's like, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, it's just impossible, it's not possible that our government could be involved. And I'm saying, I'm not saying our government was involved. I'm just saying that there are things right in front of our face, real facts, that we were not made aware of. And we're going to do some more of those. And keep your mind open.
Exactly.
Because if you don't know all the facts, you can't put a puzzle together.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start slowly putting these facts together, that you understand that, like Prescott Bush had no problem making his fortune off of the Nazis. This is not and they not like this is equal to Nazis, but they were making booze during the Prohibition and all that kind of stuff. This is not a family that's opposed to making a dollar, even if it's, maybe not entirely ethical. And like I said, I'm not saying that George Bush was involved, because I really don't think that he was personally, but I want you to look at the facts of where Osama bin Laden came from, and then we're going to get into how that got turned towards Saddam Hussein, and which was absolutely pointing the finger away from George Bush Sr.'s business. That's what that did.
Yep.
Was turn our eyes away from George Bush Sr.'s business. And when we went in for the war to get us, Saddam Hussein, America was behind that. America pulls together. They were behind that, and I can say that at that time I was skeptical, and I was one of few people. My own family, I was one of few people that was like, wait a minute, though. Weren't we told that it was Osama bin Laden? But then they said, well, there's weapons of mass destruction, in Iraq. And so people went, oh, well, there's weapons of mass destruction. And this, something George Bush did at the correspondence dinner that I'll never forget, because it was so blatantly almost making fun of the American people, I felt like, is he made a video where he was in the Oval Office and he was looking under the furniture for weapons of mass destruction, and looked to the camera and says, I'll find them. I'll swear I'll find them.
Jeez.
While we had men and women being killed.
Yep.
In that war. And it wasn't funny. It's not funny when you put people in a war, people's children, people's fathers, people's mothers in a war, and to make a video where you're like, oh, we're going to find them. That really solidified that I wasn't a fan of George Bush. Right at that moment, I thought, oh my God, that was horrific. And that's the mindset you're in right now, when people are grieving for their families, their family members.
Yeah.
It was horrible. So I want people to take in those facts and not automatically write it off as nut jobs and people who are out to get the government, because frankly, I don't care what party you belong to. When push comes to shove, we're Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Period. We are Americans. Rob's not. But we are. And I don't care what party it is. I'm just as angry that Bill Clinton ignored the warnings and didn't do anything as I am that George Bush was reading a book upside down when he knew that was happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a party issue for me. It's an American issue.
Definitely.
That we should all want to know the answers as Americans. And it should never be party over country, ever, especially in cases like this. And when it comes to putting our children in wars.
Yep.
So, that war is still continuing. It's still in Afghanistan.
Yep.
That war is still continuing all these years later, unnecessarily. And it just breaks my heart. So this is not unpatriotic or against our troops in any fashion. It's our duty to understand what happened, because our kids, our people's children, fathers, sons, mothers, sisters died because of our reaction to this. And I just want to say that starting off by understanding who Osama bin Laden was and why he was there and what we used him for is a good starting point in the podcast to come, because it wasn't a mystery.
Yep.
So I'm sorry that I'm going to step off my soapbox right now. And sorry.
No, that was very well said. I agree 100%. And something I like to touch on too is not only did we know about Osama, but we knew about the hijackers weeks before the event took place. We were watching them. The FBI was watching them.
Yeah, we moved to Arizona. I was in Arizona. We were in Arizona, and those hijackers trained in Flagstaff.
Oh wow,
Arizona. Yeah.
that's
so
crazy.
I know, right? So yeah, they knew where they were. It came out in the news immediately.
Yeah.
That they had trained in Flagstaff. It was information they let out. So yeah, they were being watched. It wasn't a surprise to anybody.
Nope.
It was a surprise to the American people, but
Exactly.
to anybody in charge and to anybody who let people go to work that day, it wasn't a surprise to them.
Yep.
And I got cut off again.
Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
Mom. And she's gone.
She'll be back. So, so Jory, I guess it's just me and you now. Two down, two to go.
All right. Well, yeah, what she said, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say, that I believe this person did it, or I believe that person did it. And it's another thing to just question and say, well, why wasn't it prevented? And whose feet do the 3,000 people's bodies lay at? Who's responsible? Because the people who we attacked and the people who we killed for it weren't responsible. We can all agree on that, I think.
Yeah.
As far as us attacking Afghanistan instead of Saudi Arabia, and Osama bin Laden having the involvement that he actually had, and these things come out later on, and we're like, oh, yep, we didn't actually need to kill those people. We should be directing our aggression toward, I don't know, maybe someone more close by.
Well, it was I remember, because I was 16 when it happened, and I still remember the torrent of information that came. It felt almost immediately. Hello?
Sorry, I got cut off again.
Welcome back.
The government's coming for me.
Oh, they're coming.
And
yes.
I'm sorry, but I can't see the chat, but Diabolical Witness said, "Thank you, Excellent." And you're welcome.
I was just telling Jeremy that I remember 9/11 happening because I was about 16 at the time, and the information that came out was almost immediate. And it was so weird how, we were like, oh, it's Osama bin Laden's fault, and it was the Taliban, and we're going to go to Afghanistan. And then it felt like right after that, it was like, oh, and we're also going to go after Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And all of us were the wounds were fresh for us at the time, so we're like, yeah, get them all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, attacked America, but then like as time wore on, and it was gradual, but you started to see people being like, wait, why are we in Iraq? What's going on? Why haven't we killed Osama bin Laden yet? Like we're the greatest army in the world, and we're still crawling through dirt holes looking for this guy.
Right.
So it was such a confusing time because it didn't even feel like there was a grieving period as far as the government went. They just said, "Oh, we know who did it. We're going after them right now.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go, everybody!"
Completely
Charge!
reactionary. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a completely reactionary, like immediate response. We know who did this. We're going after them. And then it was kind of like, we're also going over here too. We were just so, as people, as Americans, we were grieving. Like we just lost 3,000 of our own people, and such a tragedy that we were gung ho. We were like, go for it. It even goes back to when you were talking about that building burning down in Germany. Like the people were just we were scared. They were scared and they wanted retribution, and we were the same way. We were scared and we wanted retribution. So, it was such even at 16, it felt just like a whirlwind of crap.
And they played on that.
It was unfortunate.
Yeah, they played on those emotional strings, and go ahead.
I'm sorry. It was a very. It brought this country together.
Yes, for sure.
So it was a very nationalistic time, and it was a very, we are Americans, and you're not gonna F with us.
Yep.
And
yeah.
And it was nice.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't party. There was no party line then. It was, we're Americans. Maybe we should introduce you to us. We're not taking that.
Forgot about. Yeah, especially right now, with the turmoil that we have with our political system right now, we forget. We're so consigned with us being party. Oh, I'm a Democrat. Oh, I'm a Republican. We forget, and I think you said it earlier, Mom. We're Americans first, and that 9/11, as tragic as it was, made us be like, whoa, no, we're America, bitch.
Yeah,
you don't mess with us.
Yeah, it's like a family, and you can call your brother names all day long. Or in your case, well, yeah, you have a brother, but I don't think you're going to be calling him names, but you know what I mean? You can pick on your siblings all day long, but somebody else picks on your siblings and you're like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it was really that kind of a feeling in this country. Like, yeah, we can bicker about, politics and, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes right down to it, we're Americans, and it was really that feeling. And I thought it was, I thought it was really awesome to see that come together in that sort of a way.
Yeah.
I think the way as we as a people in the country reacted in a very positive way.
Yeah.
In that sense, it actually is probably the most patriotic I've ever felt.
Yeah. Your dad went out and bought this huge flag to hang up, and everybody in our neighborhood was, and everybody was, and it was very. It didn't matter what party you were. The stuff we argued about before didn't matter. And
it wasn't as, overall, yes, the attitude was definitely beneficial for the American people, but you gotta also think about the American Muslims at the time. That was a very non-hospitable time for them, while we were being very patriotic.
But in reality, I didn't even know that they were the attackers. I didn't know they were Muslim. That really wasn't in my memory and in my experience. That really wasn't. anything that anybody focused on at the time, because they were just the Taliban or Al Qaeda. It was Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what they were.
Al
They were Al
Qaeda.
Qaeda.
I'm
So
not.
it
I'm
was
not
like
saying
they were a
like.
street gang,
Yeah.
and so yes, I'm sure for them that I'm sure for them that it was a scary environment.
Yeah.
With them being hyper aware
For
that
sure.
the
Well,
attackers
it's
were
still
Muslim.
to this day.
Exactly.
To this day, Muslim
Yeah.
people still get treated like very harshly
Right.
because of those events. I can't
Oh
imagine what
yeah.
it's like to be a Middle Eastern American living in America right now. It's
Oh,
or in, like honestly, any minority right now with the climate, it's hostile.
Well, it's too bad that it takes such a tragic event
Yeah.
to remind people that we are all, this is a ship, we're all in it together. So start paddling.
Exactly.
And it's unfortunate that it takes such a traumatic event to remind people of that. But it was very interesting, and I don't know. It was something I'd never experienced before, obviously, but I suppose it was the same thing when Pearl Harbor got bombed, and
Yeah.
and of course the Japanese Americans at that time were rounded up and put
Exactly. Yep.
into they're what do they call them?
Internment camps.
Internment camps, yeah. And my grandmother told us a story about how in the tiny, tiny town she grew up in Washington, and I mean tiny. It had like a population of 100 people, and they were all my family. They had an internment camp there, and she would sit on one side of the barbed wire fence, and there was a little Japanese child, a little girl, that would sit on the other side of the fence, and they would toss a ball back and forth.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's in in recent history. So, fear makes a lot of people make some strange, questionable decisions.
Definitely.
Anyway, I'm off my soapbox because every time I get on one, the government comes in and takes away my connection. They're like, you can talk about necrophilia all day long, but do not. Don't even go there. Anyway.
So,
do you have
yeah,
more?
I just have literally just the day before 9/11. This is also completely documented. This is not a conspiracy in any way, but on September 10th, the day before 9/11, former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld revealed that the Pentagon had, quote, lost a whopping $2.3 trillion from its budget. $2 trillion just vanished, okay? Well, that $2 trillion would be forgotten in less than 48 hours when the shocking events of 9/11 took over news completely. And you might be asking, why is this relevant? Well, the exact wing of the Pentagon that was hit was indeed the home of the accounting offices that were investigating the missing 2.3 trillion, along with their sister offices based in New York City inside, you guessed it, the World Trade Center.
Wow.
125 people who were killed in the Pentagon crash, quote, alone, most of them were accountants. So
Wow.
the direct wing and offices which were investigating the 2.3 trillion that were reported missing only the day before was destroyed, along with their sister offices in the World Trade Center. One which was in Building 7, which we'll get into that in the next podcast, but was not hit by a plane and was also brought down. So yeah, that's a really fishy bit of information that I think people tend to overlook as well. Like, it could be a coincidence, very well. It could be a coincidence, but at the same time, it's a hell of a coincidence. If
Right.
it is. Like, yeah. And 2.3 trillion. Let's think of the number as well. 2.3 trillion is a lot of money. Okay, They didn't just lose some chump change. That they're not. 2.3 trillion is a lot of money. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. And for it to just go missing, quote unquote, right before the most horrific event, I think arguably in history, takes place, you gotta ask some questions.
And that was never. There was never an explanation given for that ever.
No, the actual the missing money is now 6 trillion, as of 2013. So
You're kidding me.
the money keeps getting lost, quote lost.
Wow.
And the theory that like people like Stephen Greer and Tom DeLonge theorizes that money that's black money. That's money that's used for these black operations for, stuff that the government doesn't even know about. That only like 5 people within the government actually know about, and they don't actually know about it. They just know parts of it because if they knew the whole thing, they'd be killed. That type of thing. And that's just speculation, but the 2.3 trillion that was missing, that's a fact, and it was announced the day before 9/11 took place, and the places that were investigating it, all of which were destroyed on the same day after. Yeah.
Wow.
A
comment from Diabolical Witness says Donald Rumsfeld was fired by Bush and Cheney, and Bush did not speak. Cheney and Bush did not speak sense, pretty much. You keep that man out of my office was from Bush about Cheney.
He let it slip a day early. That was his warning, probably. That was probably his warning, like, hey guys, 2.3 trillion's missing. And then we see what happens, and if people were paying attention, they'd probably be still pursuing it. People stopped paying attention once 3,000 people died. And I don't blame them. I'd stop paying attention to the money too, but...
Right. Right. But then to never go back. Like... Yeah.
Well, we never really did anything about the weapons of mass destruction either. We just kind of said, oh, guess they're not there.
Yeah, I know, and that's why...
Guess that's our bad. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But people died trying to find them. Like...
Right.
What do we owe them,
Yeah. Well, I know that's another reason why I was so upset about that little skit. Was because so many people died trying to find those, and it just was not. It was not funny. That's one of those. There's some jokes where you're like, it's too soon, but that's one of those jokes that like never. It'd never be too soon to make a joke like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just don't. And somebody let him film that. You would think there was some advisor that'd be like, probably not.
Man.
But, all right. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. I also have the UK being notified first. If you want me to talk about that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Of course.
We don't have much information on that. Tracy tried to look into it. I think. Would you say that you couldn't find anything?
Yes. I couldn't find anything older than 2016. I do want to point that out. If you want to look this information up, it's very difficult. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff that's been wiped from the internet. Can't wipe it from my memory, though, people. You can't. There's a lot of stuff that's been wiped from the internet, and some of this is that stuff. And so it makes the investigating a little bit more difficult. So I couldn't find anything really older than 2016. I went 32 pages into Google and finally found some stuff that was from like 2012. I did find like articles that were just about the bombing in like 2002, but the clip that I had seen with my own 2 eyes, you can't find it. It's not out there. The clip you're going to talk about, it's just not out there anymore, which I find to be so sketchy.
Yeah.
I consider
I consider something buried whenever I have to go to the second page of Google. I can only
Yeah,
imagine
right?
as far as you had to go. Jeez.
Yeah, I went 32 pages in, and that's when I found that one thing that I found to send to you.
Yeah.
And it was deep.
Jeez.
And so I just think it's so weird that, and there was another something we did on conspiracies that was very hard for me to find information on, but they're kind of running into each other right now. So if you go to look into this information, note that a lot of it is not out there anymore. And 2016, if you can't find anything past 2016, that's weird.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, go ahead.
So, lastly, just before the horrific moments that the 3 buildings came down, the BBC was already reporting it. I wish Rob was here for this one. The United States media didn't even know that the building was coming down. This is a quote from the BBC. A 47-story building about 100 meters from the Twin Towers, World Trade Center 7, was never struck by an airplane. 2 planes plus 3 towers has equaled plenty of questions. Questions compounded by the BBC's own reporting of the collapse of World Trade Center 7. In the frantic, confusing aftermath of the terror attacks, the BBC reported that World Trade Center 7, which had not been hit by a plane, had collapsed 20 minutes before it actually came down.
Mm-hmm.
And this was aired live on television.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the clip of it.
Yeah, so
Um,
they knew before our media even knew.
yeah. And yeah, that's strange.
Very.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't even understand that. I really can't even understand how
I
that
can't either.
something like that happens.
It's very
I mean,
odd.
that's a major screw up. That's so weird. Well, I love this segment. You did awesome.
Thank you. That was fun.
It was very interesting. And I think it sets some groundwork for a lot of groundwork for the upcoming podcast that we're going to be doing.
Yep.
So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask right now, go ahead and do that. So what do you think, Jor?
Who done it?
The Illuminati.
Ah,
Yes.
didn't even think about them.
We
Sneaky.
didn't even bring in the Illuminati. I can't believe
See,
it.
you guys are talking about the magic trick. Here's the government making you look over here while the Illuminati is actually doing everything.
It's Beyonce.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't figure that out.
Yep.
Everything is Beyonce. Everything.
Yeah. She owns the world.
I mean, Jay-Z's new album was 411. I mean, 4 kind of looks like a 9. I'm just saying. He was trying to let us know.
That's right.
Yep.
Doesn't 411 mean something like information?
Yeah.
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 I think it's also pretty weird that we dial 911 in the United States. Isn't that weird?
Oh, we do. Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. I always thought that, like, whenever, because, I mean, I was really young when it happened. But I remember my mom, like, you know, watching the TV, and I was watching it, and I was like, I didn't grasp that it was, like, actually people until, like, later on. You know, I was like, oh,
Right.
I'm watching people die right now, you know, like, I didn't grasp that, and I remember, you know, thinking early on as a kid, like, wait, like, did we start dialing 911 because of that event? Like, I was like, why is it 911 and why did it happen on 9/11? I don't. But
Right.
that's just my little pea brain.
My experience of the day it happened was, I'll tell the people listening to the podcast, I would get up a little bit early to wake my girls up for school, and Jory had been on the computer and he'd left it on. And I got on, and he had a friend who thought I was Jory and said, "Dude, look at your TV. History's being made." And I was like, this isn't Jory. And I went and got Jory. I went downstairs and turned the TV on, and the first tower had been hit. And I ran into the kitchen to start getting the girls' breakfast going, and I heard Jory yell from in the living room. Because when the first one was hit, it was like, well, I guess that could be an accident.
Yeah.
Because small, and I didn't realize it was like an airliner either. There was just no, because nobody was, there was no news agency who had just been focusing on the tower. Like, it came out later, you could see the videos and stuff, but but at the time we didn't have that information. So I in my brain, I guess, I kind of thought it was a small little two-seater,
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, dude, that was some bad flying. But then when he yelled and the second one hit, that, of course, the news was there and on it right then. So they replayed that, and it was an airliner, and that's when the sort of the reality sunk in.
It might have not been an accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was still, my brain was still fighting with the understanding of what is happening.
Definitely, yeah.
Terrorist attack wasn't even on my list of things that it could be. I just didn't understand. And then within a short period of time, the Pentagon happened, and the plane in Pennsylvania, obviously, and then when Jory does his plane segment, I'm going to talk about another plane that was involved that we don't talk about. The news doesn't talk about. It was wiped clean, and I saw it with my own two eyes. I will talk more about that because that is a mystery to me. But, everybody, we had carpools taking the kids to school, and it wasn't my day that day. So I took the girls outside, and my neighbor came running out, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, have you seen the TV?" And it was just crazy. And of course, I sat in front of the TV all day and was talking to my husband all day about it. And then it was replayed over and over and over and over again. I mean, I can't even tell you the extent that it was replayed so often that I had to stop watching TV. I was having nightmares, panic attacks. Right after that, we had anthrax mailed to somebody, and so immediately afterwards, we're being told to duct tape our windows and around our doors, and it was just super scary. And then, of course, we were told that it was a terrorist attack when I couldn't even wrap my brain around it. And the Twin Towers had been bombed a couple years before that in the basement. Yeah. So it wasn't like unheard of, but it was what actually happened was unheard of. That was unheard of. And it was just shocking. I was stunned. And eventually the news said we're not going to replay that again, because you could see people jumping out of buildings. Yeah. You can find those videos if you want to on YouTube. I'm not going to link to anything like that, but it was horrifying. So it's interesting. I wish Rob hadn't gone too, because I'd like him to tell his experience of the day it happened, because like I had said before, we all have different perspectives of what happened.
Yeah.
You were young enough that you thought, the 911 and calling 911 and calling 911 were somehow intertwined.
Yeah.
Jory was old enough to know what happened, but didn't really understand the magnitude, and this is just a fascinating topic to me.
For sure.
So if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank everybody for coming and for listening, and remind you that next week it'll be Friday. I'm gonna do my segment, and my segment is going to be about the Twin Towers. So we'll be talking about that, and then Rob will do the Pentagon on the following week, and Jory will do Pennsylvania on the following week, and then we're all going to get back and talk about everybody's information together and how the chains link, and let you guys, weigh in. And we'd really appreciate it if you would weigh in and tell us what you think and give us your opinions. So, I have a group on Facebook, and if Maya will link to that and link to Rob's group. Also, if you like my content and you would like to support this channel, please consider becoming a Patreon member. Maya can put my link to Patreon up there. The money will be used for merchandise so that we can not only just sell merchandise, but give away merchandise. And we already have some really great ideas. And Jeremy's done a really great mock-up for a t-shirt that I think you guys are really going to like. And if that's all, thank you, Jeremy. You did a great job.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Jor.
Thanks for having me.
How's that drink doing?
Oh, it's been long gone.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, next time warn me.
Well,
And
next time, make sure you get yourself a nice beverage, and see we can have drunk exit light time.
yeah, well, maybe not during my,
Twin
maybe
Towers.
not during the Twin Towers. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not the best idea. So, if you haven't already, and you'd like to, please subscribe. Also, give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to be notified about my new content and when we go live for podcasts, please click that bell. And thank you for supporting this channel. I appreciate it. And if we're done, good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.